Just posted a lifestyle video over the weekend quoting Joe Dispenza. Here's a little clip from it in case you didn't see it, and I'm going to tag it down below.
You would take your attention off that person, which means you would begin to break those energetic bonds, and now you're taking your power back. Yes. You're calling energy back to you, and we've measured this, and all of a sudden it builds this bigger electromagnetic field around the person's body. That's energy to heal.
When I first saw this video, it was a new concept that I'd actually never thought about before. We get addicted to emotions, which keeps us fixated on somebody or a situation and disallows us to move on. I would be lying if I said that I was not stuck in this at this very moment. And I don't want to be stuck in it anymore. I want to move on and move past it. I can feel that there's something wrong with giving all of my time and energy to somebody or something that doesn't deserve it and not pouring it back into myself, my healing, and my future. But I had gotten stuck. I am currently stuck in this fixation on ruminating, intellectualizing, and focusing on a situation. Focusing on a person that honestly does not deserve it. I do not think there is anything wrong with rehashing what happened to you, trying to figure it out, coming to a logical conclusion as to what the situation was. I think that's a necessary part of moving on. But there comes a point where we have to actually consciously move on. We have to make the decisions and the choices and the habits that help us to move on. Now, of course, before I can do that, I have to intellectualize why I am stuck on an emotion. So I got to thinking about this video today. Why do we get stuck on emotions that don't work for us? Why do we get stuck on feelings? Why do we get addicted to them, as Joe Dispenza talks about in this video? Well, I started thinking about what my personal addiction is, and it is to feelings of abandonment. It is to feelings of being unchosen. Why would I want to perpetuate those feelings in my life? They're terrible feelings. Well, I think when somebody triggers those feelings in me, it so resonates with my first original emotions of life. I'm always going to go back to my origin story because so much of our psyche is created in the first few years of our life. So we have to go back to those first original feelings that we had in our formative years. I've talked about this many times on my podcast and in TikToks, but many of the feelings that I felt in my formative years were abandonment and being unchosen. In those years, our caregivers need to give us those feelings of security and being chosen and being loved as we establish our sense of self. And when we are not given those feelings, when we are not given that safety, we then have to come up with coping strategies to give it back to ourselves. But we're so immature and we have not developed enough to know how to do that, often in positive, healthy ways. The ways that I did that as a child was to intellectualize the situation and to look at the ways that they were abandoning me, intellectualize the ways and why they were doing it, so that then I could tell myself that I was deserving of love because intellectually they shouldn't have denied it to me. And then I would give myself the love. I would prove to myself through intellectualizing that I deserved it. Well, that's not the best coping strategy. Like at some point, the emphasis and focus has to go off of them and it has to come back to us. It's an inside job. We have to give it to ourselves. So I think this is what Joe Dispenza is talking about in this video. He is saying, be aware of your thoughts. Be aware of what you're giving your energy to. Because when you start to recognize that you're giving it to a source outside yourself, you have to at some point stop yourself from doing that and find a better way. Because if you don't, you get addicted to that toxic cycle, in my case, of identifying how somebody abandoned and hurt me and then convincing myself intellectually that it shouldn't have happened. I am addicted to those feelings of abandonment so that I can then go back and do the work to build myself up, thereby giving somebody who doesn't deserve it all of my energy. Instead of, as Joe talks about, turning it back on ourselves and creating a force field of energetic healing. So it's so much easier said than done, right? Like, oh, I'm just supposed to stop thinking about it. I'm just supposed to, like, every time I think about the way that that person did me dirty, I'm just supposed to, like, pivot and not think about it anymore. Yeah, really easy, Joe. Like, I get it. I get the incredulousness of that advice he's giving. But what I'm realizing is it's a lot easier than we think, because oftentimes as we're thinking about the way they did us dirty, we're also thinking about the ways that we showed up for ourselves, the ways that we were amazing, the ways that we showed up for them and they didn't show up for us. So instead of looking at a source outside ourselves to build ourselves and recognize what we've done well in our lives and how we've shown up for ourselves and how we've been strong, we need to just get them out of the equation and focus on the ways that we have shown up for ourselves. So what I've been doing is when I start to think about that situation where, this person did me dirty, I immediately stop. I recognize that I'm going down this rabbit hole of rumination where I point the finger at him and I say to myself, damn, I showed up so well in that relationship. I was so supportive. I was emotionally mature. I was emotionally really adept. I learned so much about myself. I learned how to meet my own needs. I'm so proud of myself that I've gone no contact and I've been able to not have the hit of dopamine of his communication. I love that I'm journaling. I love that I'm creating so much. Do you see how that turns it from emphasis on that person and how they did you wrong and ruminating about it and taking all that power back to yourself and building yourself and hyping yourself and recognizing yourself? Because at the end of the day, it always comes back to us. It's an inside job, and we need to get better at honoring that energetic force field of healing and not outsourcing it to somebody else and making our value congruent with another person's actions or another situation's importance in our life.